Welcome back, guys. I hope you're all having a great day. And as usual, we are covering a game from the US Chess Championship. Heading into the 8th round of the tournament, Hikaru Nakamura was the sole leader of the event. He drew his game against Sam Shanklin in this round, and this opened up the opportunity for Caruana, Sevian, and Dominguez, who were all half a point behind Hikaru, to try and catch up if they win their respective matchups. In this game, Sevian is playing against Dominguez. Both of them trail Hikaru by half a point. Sevian has the white pieces and he is down a pawn in this position. He decides to enter into an ending, hoping that his active rook will provide enough compensation. Now, if Dominguez wanted to draw, he could very well just play rook takes d6 and allow the capture on a7. Although black is up a pawn, this is objectively drawn. But instead, Dominguez decides to press on in this position. He played a5. So black needs this 2-on-1 majority on the queen side to have any winning chances. Sevian plays correctly, rook c6, pressuring the pawns. b5 from Dominguez, rook b6. So Dominguez cannot prevent the loss of the pawn on b5. He goes a4, king g2. So here capturing is also a very valid option. This would probably lead to a draw. And in this position, white can set up a defensive blockade with the king coming to h3 and just maintaining the rook on the third rank. So instead of rook a6, rook d2 also has to be considered, but this is fine for white. Let's look at a possible line. So this looks pretty drawish. One idea for white is to try and trade this pawn on a4 for black's pawn on e6, and with black's double rook pawns, it's a theoretical draw. So in this position, king g2 played instead of capturing on b5. So Dominguez goes king to f7, and here capturing was again an option for Sevian, but instead he played a3. And this move gives Dominguez a slither of hope. Dominguez goes rook g8 check, and rook to g5, keeping the pawn on b5, and therefore black's winning chances alive. Sevian goes to d7. So the computer thinks that the best move is to go rook b7 check. Let's take a look at its line. So if king f6, rook h7, attacking the pawn on h6. If king g6, then white can always go back to e7. So rook h7 also threatens to push the pawn. So black goes rook d5, and after rook takes h6, king e5, d7. That has to be taken. Now rook takes h5. White wins a pawn. White is up a pawn in this position, but after rook d3, black gets quite a bit of activity. But according to the computer, white should be fine. So instead we see the move d7, king e7, black has to cover this pawn. Sevian played rook takes e6, king takes d7, so obviously if king takes e6, then white is going to promote. So king takes d7, rook takes h6. So Sevian simplified the position a bit. So how does one try and win this position? Doesn't seem obvious with the black king being cut off by the rook. Dominguez understood this position, and he shows us how to proceed. He plays rook c5. Sevian played f4 and king to c7. So what's the idea here? Well, Dominguez wants to trade this pawn on a3 for his pawn on h5. So Sevian played f5, sacrificing a pawn to delay rook c3. It's hard to say if this was a mistake or if Sevian should have played king e2 instead of f5. He would have to calculate what happens after rook c2 check. So the immediate rook c3 would allow white to push the f-pawn, and it's not clear if black can win this. However, on rook c2 check, king d3, rook a2, this would at least threaten rook takes a3 with check. Things start to get really complicated here, and white would have to calculate if he is in time to stop these pawns. So instead, Sevian played f5. That was taken. King e2, white just about stops the a pawn from falling. But this is where Dominguez shows his class. King to b7. And what this does is that it takes control of some key squares, preventing white from getting the rook behind the pawn. So f3 from Sevian, now b4, creating a passed pawn. Rook d6 from Sevian, and here another great move. Rook to f8. So rooks belong behind passed pawns. King f2 from Sevian. We have rook to a8. So instead of king f2, let's say white gives a check. This doesn't accomplish much. Black will slowly capture the pawn on b4. And here king c4. After king b4, black is winning this position. So king f2, we have rook to a8, getting behind the pawn. Rook to d1, king b6. So Dominguez now goes for the pawn on b4. King g3. So Sevian tries one last trick. King to b5, king h4, hoping for black to go a2. And try and queen the pawn. But here, rook f1, this will buy white just enough time. And here black isn't in time to stop the pawn. White is going to queen, and this is going to be a draw. So instead of rook f1, if white plays rook takes a2, then he's going to be one tempo short from drawing the game. And you can see that black is just in the nick of time. So Dominguez saw that and he played rook f8. So now if king takes h5, rook takes f3 and black is going to win, since white's king is miles away from the action on the queen side. So we see the move rook f1, rook to f5 from Dominguez, defending the h-pawn. We have f4, king takes b4, and Dominguez is now completely in control, and it's just a matter of time. Rook f2, rook a5, rook a2, but the king comes in. So white has to sacrifice his rook for the pawn. But here black can quite comfortably stop white's pawn. In this position, Samuel Sevian resigned. An absolutely amazing endgame play from Leinier Dominguez. So he now joins Hikaru in the lead with 5.5 out of 8. Caruana drew his game against Wesley So, meaning that he is a close second on 5 out of 8 in this tightly contested US Championship. I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching and have a great day.